Okay, we have here Jamie Saft, pianist and the leader of the New Zion Trio, who just came off the stage, still warm.
Absolutely.
So, believe it or not, man, I've been for about 30 years waiting for this concept to happen of putting, original Jamaican rhythms together with kind of spiritual jazz. So, nobody seems to come up until now, When and how did you get this idea?
That's a great question. Really, just like you, almost my whole life, I'm 46,
right.
I've been sort of working towards this concept. And both reggae music and dub and spiritual jazz and improvising are like the two central musics in my life. I came up listening to both equally. In fact, I listened to reggae for years before I even discovered improvised music. And I find that both those musics access these ecstatic states, meditation, mysticism. Those things are deep in reggae and dub and in jazz music. And they both get to sort of that same spiritual place of the mind, like a transcendent place. So it was just obvious to put those things together for me. And I really sort of was waiting for the right musicians to find who could play both musics equally well and also respected both musics equally.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I find that some jazz players think that reggae is easy. And it's not. And it's just as deep a path and as broad of a music as jazz and improvised music is. So for me, Bonnie Whaler, Peter Tosh, Bob Marley, Itals, Abyssinians, those are the Miles, Coltrane, Ornette of reggae music. So for me, this was like just a chance to put together a number of things that I love. Improvising, jazz, spiritual jazz, specifically like Alice Coltrane, Pharoah Sanders, Lonnie Liston Smith, late Coltrane also, late John Coltrane, with the dub and the reggae. So it was just obvious for me. But it did take a while to find musicians who can are equally comfortable in both worlds and then comfortable with them together.
Yeah, that's very true. What is the status of Hamid Drake in the band? He is not a regular drummer.
This is the first time we've ever played with Hamid in this band. And both Brad and I have known Hamid and played with him in different projects for many years. And this opportunity arose to do this with Hamid, and it just seemed absolutely the perfect match. And it was so easy for me with Hamid. I mean, he just, like we just said, he's had a lifetime of playing reggae music, of playing jazz,
right,
of improvising within all these worlds. And so it was absolutely easy as pie for us to do this with Hamid. And I'm going to be very honest with you, we didn't even get a rehearsal. We just went up there and did that. And it was on that high a level, literally. No rehearsal.
Right.
We talked about it for 5 minutes before we went on stage. And that's the level that people like Hamid and Brad Jones bring to the stage.
Right.
So I feel very honored and fortunate to get to work with musicians of this caliber. It's the elite, highest level of musicianship and commitment to this musical path, the improvised path. It takes a very special person to, commit to this.
Yeah, it does. And you really have to be inside the music that you know.
100%. 100%.
What it is actually and what goes with it,
Absolutely. Very true.
Yeah. So I believe all those dubwise effects you did yourself.
Yes.
Not the mixer.
Correct. Though he had the chance if he wanted to, but...
have you given him leave?
Of course. He could have done whatever he wanted, but, we didn't really have much time to sound check, or we just did a quick line check, and so we didn't really get to talk about it that much. But I like to sort of incorporate the extra stuff into whatever the music is. So sometimes it's appropriate, and sometimes I like to just let it go and just dig into a more playing thing. So the beauty of this band is it's really open. The idea and the concept is really open, and it's accepting of all sort of sounds.
Yeah.
You know, I don't judge the sounds that are presented here. So you can have really different musicians come in and play in this band, and if they are open, and if they are, it's sort of a selfless way to play. It's not, a lot of times in jazz, it's all about your solos and showing off all the things that you can do. And this is the total opposite. It's a team effort. Reggae music is about everybody contributing equally. And it's sort of this like positivity path of approaching music. So I find sometimes, not the best stuff, but at sort of the lower levels of improvised music, you struggle more with selfish musicians. But when you get to the top level, and I've been so lucky to play with so many of my heroes in jazz music. I worked for decades with John Zorn. I've made records with people like Wadada Leo Smith, Roswell Rudd, Danny Ray Thompson and Marshall Allen from Sun Ra Orchestra, Steve Swallow, Bobby Previtt. These are my heroes. Growing up, these are the people I listened to. And so I feel so lucky to get to experience making music with these people. And I've learned so much from each one of those musicians about sort of this selfless path towards improvising. So improvising is not about you doing your thing. It's about a collective experience that we all get elevated by that experience. And when you play with masters like we just spoke about, that is just the baseline at which they start. There's no, there's nothing extra. It's distilled down to the purest essence of improvising, true like team improvising. And I try and bring that same team concept to all of my music, no matter what it is, whether it's reggae or jazz or rock or funk or, you know, classical music even. It's a selfless act. And when you are selfless about it, and when you put aside the things that you think are important and let the sort of the collective, the community make the music, then the audience participates too. Everyone participates in it. So when I go out to play this show, I can do no rehearsal, and I can just feel the vibe of what's happening. You can feel the people. Everyone is invested in the music. And the greatest improvised music, the greatest reggae music, the greatest rock music, any style of music is transcendent in that way. So when I go to a Bob Dylan concert, I can transcend in that same way. I try and experience that in all music that I enjoy and bring that to all of my music, something more selfless.
You have actually recorded Dylan too, one album.
I do. I have a record of Bob Dylan's music, and actually it deals with some of these same things, trying to consider Dylan's music sort of in this improvised area. So people think of him as just great lyrics, great songs.
He's the greatest improviser.
That's absolutely right.
Never two gigs the same.
That's absolutely right.
Always putting the song into the new clothes, you know.
Totally true. And that's one of the great things about seeing Bob Dylan play live over 40 years. Every time you see him, every
different.
song is radically transformed. It's
Yeah.
something totally different. And Dylan is absolutely going towards the same type of transcendent space that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So the changes maybe are more internal than external, although sometimes they're very clearly these huge changes. You know, people criticize him for, they can't even recognize his songs sometimes. I love that about him.
Yeah.
You know, that he'll suddenly reconsider a song.
Me too. Because that's, you know, in rock and roll they always talk about the sense of danger, and I do too. And that's exactly what it is. He takes the risks and he doesn't give a fuck about nostalgia, you know.
That's right.
Has no interest in that kind of
That's right. And
rubbish.
all the greatest music that we've talked about and that we could talk about does the same thing.
I have to ask, because I'm also a great lifelong fan of Iggy Pop, and that I know that you recently with your New Standard
That's correct.
trio worked with him in a jazz setting.
That's right.
How was that?
Amazing. Completely transcendent. Deeper than even I ever could have imagined. And Iggy Pop is just such a broad thinker, not just a musician. He's a brilliant, brilliant man. Beautiful, brilliant, smart, insightful guy.
Yeah.
And so I felt so lucky that he came to our project in a very organic way. And I'll tell you a little bit about how it happened. I made a record with this trio, the New Standard trio that you mentioned, with Steve Swallow and Bobby Previtt, two of my heroes listening to music as I grew up. So our first record came out in, I think, 2014 on Rare Noise Records, great British label in London. And so I went to make a second record with this band. I wrote a bunch of music. We made the whole record. And just before the session, someone from the record label said, you know, we have this connection, we have this mutual connection through Bill Laswell. Laswell's a friend of mine. I've known him for many years through John Zorn. And the label also has done some work with him. And the Giacomo Bruzzo, who's runs Rare Noise Records, said, you know, what about if we could get Iggy Pop to sing on a couple of tunes on this record? What would you think of that? And I said, oh, that sounds incredible. Of course, go ahead. Thinking this is never going to happen. You know,
It's
you know, Iggy doesn't need to do this, and he doesn't need the aggravation. And so we finished the record, and I didn't really do anything special for Iggy. I just made my record as best I could. And with Steve and Bobby, that's easy. You know, these are the masters, the masters. Imagine. And so we had finished the record. It was a fully realized instrumental record.
Okay.
And then at the end of the session, I said, oh, wait a second. I was supposed to do something for Iggy to sing on. And I said, you know what? We're not going to do anything different. I'm just going to send Iggy 3 of these tunes that I think he might enjoy listening to. Not even sing on. Just here's 3 tunes that I'm proud of, and maybe you'll like them. So we sent them to Iggy to hear, and 24 hours later, we all got an email from Iggy, and it said, I love this music. I'm definitely going to do this. I'm going to do all 3 of these tunes. So you managers figure out how. And they did. And Iggy came to us because he loved the music. This is one of the greatest honors of my life, that a piece of music that I wrote inspired Iggy Pop, not only to contribute, but to contribute on such a deep level.
Oh man, I listened to them on the net, those songs, and I was really taken aback how would I put it, how vulnerable he was, and sort of like really standing on the edge.
That's right.
It has to do with his age, you know.
That's right.
Time is running
out.
Yeah.
Wisdom. There's so much depth and wisdom to his whole approach, to music, to singing, to life. This is a deep, deep guy. You don't become...
I thought, you know, ages ago about his lyrics that people don't get how deep they often are,
right.
you know.
That's right.
Because they're kind of offhand, but at the same time, you know...
That's right. There's many levels.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
People always pick up on his physical side, which is, I mean,
important.
I don't blame them.
That's right.
but still, you know, and the wildness. But there is this intellectual side also.
Absolutely.
That is
and
really...
he brought so much depth to our record. It really kind of, it didn't surprise me. I knew if he committed to doing it that it would be deep, but he could have done anything and we would have been happy.
Yeah.
But man, he exceeded all expectations. It was, you know, I'll never forget, I was listening to it the first time he sent it to us. I was in my kitchen and my children were there, and I'm listening on my iPhone with my iPhone up to my ear, and my daughter said to me, she said, "Dad, when you were listening to that Iggy Pop thing for the first time, I actually saw you laughing for once." You know, which was incredible for my kid to say to me. I was laughing and crying with joy. It was so deep and so insightful. And I really just felt like it was a home run for me. It's just such a great honor, and Iggy is so beautiful. And you hear that. You hear the realness, the vulnerability, he's not afraid to put that out there.
No.
And that takes incredible courage and wisdom and confidence, you know. And so I feel so lucky to have Iggy. I mean, you know, in the jazz world, I've worked with so many of my heroes. Now in the rock world, I've worked with Iggy Pop. I'm also extremely honored to work with Bad Brains, who's a totally influential and one of the most important bands of heavy music of all time. And so, man, I'm so lucky. I'm so very, very lucky.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
You know, I don't take that for granted.
How about with New Zion? Have you thought about any Jamaican heroes that you could get into that?
Well, we actually have HR from Bad Brains on one tune, on Chant It Down is the tune on Chaliwa. Sure, of course we've thought about some Jamaican people to contribute, and we're sort of working towards the next step of what New Zion is. Our last record was a collaboration, New Zion, with Ciro Baptista, an amazing Brazilian percussionist and legend of music, and also really one of my heroes. I've been fortunate to work with Ciro for decades now. We worked for years in John Zorn's band, and I also produced a couple of Ciro's records, Beat the Donkey, Love the Donkey, and, you know, he's a brother and one of my real heroes. So collaborating with him and introducing sort of the Brazilian vibe to the New Zion thing really opened up a lot of avenues for us. And so who knows what the next New Zion thing will be. I mean,
I was thinking of somebody like Ernest Wrangling. He's
this
very
would be
old,
incredible.
But he's still doing it.
He is, on a very high level.
To go back to our beginning of the conversation, was that a lot of people don't come to think that people like Don Drummond and well, he's gone, and Ernest Wrangling and many of those cats, you know, they were jazz musicians.
That's
when
right.
They started. They were Jamaican jazz musicians.
That's right.
So they did.
Right. And they're virtuosos of
Yeah.
their instrument on the same level as people like Steve Swallow. And that, honestly, Iggy Pop is a virtuoso on that level. And it's obvious, the moment he starts singing on our record, it's so clear that he is a virtuoso of his instrument, of his approach to music, of his lyrical content. He's absolutely on that same level, you know.
Tell you what, have you talked with Kuhna, you know, the guy who runs this festival, the artistic director?
Yes.
Of the possibility of you coming back next year with New Standard and Iggy, because I think that would be the kind of gig that Iggy would take, because I think he's pretty selective these days what he wants to get into, you know.
Well, I don't want to speculate too much, but I think you're on to something. I think there's a great possibility there that this could happen.
That would be.
Let's say that.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
say so.
Absolutely.
Okay. On this note, we can end.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Man.
Thank you. My pleasure.